I'd say 4 years ago-ish, we went down a journey. Nate kind of started this journey before me and kind of like explained the journey to me, showed me what he was looking into. And it honestly, that was like one of the more life-changing chapters of my life, like taking a look at the information that he was showing me. And a lot of the information he was showing me was through Jordan Peterson's podcasts or on YouTube, just listening to him speak. And honestly, ever since then, I've just kind of had this thirst for knowledge, and it's been really, really amazing. And I think that's one of the main reasons I started this podcast, was back in the day when Nate showed me this. So yeah, I kind of wanted Nate to explain how Peterson and other podcasters have impacted him and how they've impacted me. And I'll explain that.
Sure. So this may take a quick second because there's quite a bit of background information that's relevant here. So I do want to include it. But so we both went to Kalamazoo Christian High School, very small high school. Our graduating class was like 60 students. Bit of an echo chamber in terms of religion and the type of people that were there, backgrounds and all of that. And I remember when I was 16 and could drive and I started to feel just more independent, that my, let's say, my curiosity to explore new ideas and new knowledge kind of exploded. And it first manifested in politics, actually, which is just kind of interesting, is I initially was far more political than I am now, like way more back in high school, and then even like freshman and sophomore year of college. I still care about politics, but just not nearly as much. But it kind of exploded with politics. I remember I got into Ben Shapiro, and I mean he's quite the character. Plenty of things you can say about him, good and bad, but at least I liked his style of long form conversations that he would have with people on something he called his Sunday special. So he would bring on people that agreed with him and disagreed with him, and all sorts of different people. A couple like hardcore lefties too, that they had some good conversations. I remember he brought on Andrew Yang, and for those of you who don't know who that is, he was a 2020 Democratic presidential candidate, and he was probably one of my favorite ones on the liberal side, and was like one of the few that even dared to go on Ben's show, even though Ben is on his Sunday specials like one of the most reasonable people you'll ever listen to. So that kind of opened my eyes to that whole world. And then kind of through Ben is where I got into a bunch of other, I guess, people, influencers, whatever you want to call them, philosophers, ideas. And this is something that I know you want to touch on, so I'll quick mention this, but there's this interesting curve when you first start to learn something, which I know it has a technical name, but I forget what it is. But regardless, you feel like your knowledge is increasing rapidly. You're like, oh my word, I'm learning so much about this. And then very quickly after you make that fatal assumption, you recognize that you actually don't know anything about it at all. You know, so you pick up a book on basic economics and like, yeah, I'm going to go learn about economics. And the first thing you learn is that you don't know anything about economics and that it's insanely complicated. So, and then you can imagine that you can just saturate yourself in that new information, and it can kind of radically change your worldview. And that happened to me in both political, philosophical, and religious realms, I would say junior year of high school, and then specifically senior year. I know for you, it happened more probably freshman year of college when you were trapped in a room with me on a continuous basis. But then Ben introduced me to Peterson. I don't remember exactly what their connection was or how exactly I heard about him, but I'm pretty sure it was through Ben in some way. And then I'll admit I got absolutely obsessed with Peterson. Like, every night, go home, put on his YouTube video, fall asleep to it, kind of obsessed. And I remember you were kind of looking at me and you're like, what the heck is wrong with this guy? Like, you're kind of, not like in a bad way, you were just like unsure. I was in a different
world almost of caring about other things.
I mean, that's not bad. at the time, I kind of realized, like, all right, no one else my age gives a crap about this, which I mean, it's a little isolating, but you know, you live, it's all good. But so found Peterson, and then read his book 12 Rules for Life, which happens to be in the back of your frame over yonder, and that was one of the more transformative books that I've ever read. And when did you read the book?
I read it, I think it must have been freshman year, or I think it might have been the summer before freshman year, possibly.
Yeah.
Actually.
That seems
through
about right.
Audible.
Yeah. Random Audible plug. Love me some Audible. Makes life so much easier because people like it generally is hard to set aside time to read a book and hard to stay focused on a book. But if you're doing another task, you can just chuck on Audible just like a podcast and while you're doing laundry or whatever. Huge help for me because I can go through material so much faster. It's also a discipline issue because I'll fail to be disciplined enough to read sometimes. But normally if I'm driving or something, I can chuck on Audible. Now, the exception to that is the depth of the material. You know, if the material is like too dense, like I think I tried, I don't think it was Nietzsche. It was one of Dostoevsky's novels, and it was some philosopher's novel, and I tried to read or tried to listen to it while doing other things, and I'm like, yeah, this just isn't going to work. I know you had that. Did you have that with any one particular book?
Yeah, I tried to clean with the brothers Karamazov,
Yeah,
and I was just kind of like, I'm too, it can't be too complicated or so drawn out where like an argument is so long and like I missed it because I was focused on something else. And like, yeah, like I probably would admit that listening to a book, you might not visually like remember exactly the structure of the sentences or, what the sentences were saying. But like, I think you can get a pretty good picture. And like you said, you can kind of multitask with it. And so I bet there's cons to Audible, but yeah, it's actually all the books that are on my shelf, you can't even see them all right now, but either way, those are all honestly Audibled. Like I could talk for an entire probably hour to 3 hours on any of them, even though I never opened them. So that just goes to say that I learned something at least.
Yeah. I know there are some people that are kind of on team book or team audiobook, and at the end of the day, both are useful, and if you're gaining knowledge from them, then you're winning. So anyway, I think both have their pros and cons, but regardless, Audibled a lot of books, and yeah, so back to Peterson. Really got obsessed with Peterson, in a good way though. Like, this is the thing. Like, I don't want to get too into weeds here because I've talked about this before, and in fact, if people are interested in it, it's on the Wrestling with God podcast that we did like, almost a year ago now?
It was February 13th, 2022. So it was, yeah.
How do you remember these things?
Well, yeah, it dropped on my birthday. It was kind of like an insane, double whammy. But either way, that's how I remember.
Fair enough. And yeah. So regardless, I was relatively nihilistic. One of the consequences of the, let's say, explosion of information that I saturated myself in was that phenomenon of just the kind of the you falling into empty space as you realize just how little you know and your entire belief structures completely collapse underneath of you, even though you've been told the same thing your entire life and are surrounded by a homogenous group of people that all think the same thing. So when you just douse yourself in new information that doesn't even necessarily contradict what you were told, but just opens your eyes to the world, it can be rather chaotic. So what Peterson did is, I describe it as he put in practical, pragmatic, psychological terms the wisdom found in morality, the Bible, ethics, and put it in a way that wasn't finger wagging, like, oh, you should do this, like, you need to do this, it's your duty, and if you don't, you're a bad person. It was genuine encouragement that helped you to focus on who you could be and how good that could be for you and the people around you. And that's exactly what I needed. I needed some solidity, some order, instead of chaos.